The COVID lockdowns are moving well into the bush now, with a big part of northwest New South Wales caught up in it. Melburnians are getting used to another extension, and we've been warned the Sydney numbers are going to get worse. There are big parts of Australia COVID-free right now, but for New South Wales in particular, the coming months will be tough. So, going from north to south, no cases in Cairns again yesterday. The lockdown was lifted, but there's still the chance there could be cases lurking there, so we'll keep an eye on that. In Brisbane, 4 more cases again yesterday, but continuing optimism that that cluster is under control. Then over the border into New South Wales, there is a lot going on. Byron, Tamworth and Armidale in regional New South Wales, no more cases, and a Sydney man charged over his Byron visit. But to the south and west of there, Dubbo and 8 council areas in the northwest covering towns like Walgett, Bourke, Brewarrina and Coonamble into lockdown now. In the Hunter region, including Newcastle, just to the north of Sydney, under lockdown, 14 more cases yesterday, and there are 80 exposure sites there now. To Greater Sydney, more than 6,000 cases in the outbreak there now, 34 deaths, nearly 400 people in hospital, and the Premier is warning it's going to get worse. And then over the border into Victoria, Melbourne's lockdown has been extended for another week, 20 extra cases yesterday, and the numbers have just come through for today in the last 10 minutes. 21 local cases and 2 described as being acquired interstate, and several in the community while infectious. So the challenges continue there in Victoria as well. Okay, so let's go around the states to look at the situation in detail. First, New South Wales. Before we go to our reporters, a quick look at the trend in New South Wales. So the second biggest day of cases yesterday, up to 344, and again a large proportion in the community while infectious. The yellow portion of these bars is confirmed cases in the community while infectious. The red portion are cases where the isolation status had not been determined by the end of the day. The bottom line, still a lot of potential for further spread in Sydney, with the case numbers at more than 6,000 now. Okay, let's head first to regional New South Wales, because we had that development there overnight. Reporter Robin Heron joins us now from Dubbo. Robin, g'day. So what's the feeling like in Dubbo this morning?
Morning, Joe. As you can see behind me, Dubbo has definitely heeded the call to stay home today. It's very quiet in the main street here. But I have been told just a few blocks away there are thousands, possibly, well, hundreds at least, of cars at the Dubbo Showgrounds lining up for testing. That is the drive-through testing clinic where hundreds of cars went through yesterday as well. So in Dubbo, I think everybody is heeding the call to get tested at the most mild of symptoms and to also stay home. Further west, there is a bit of fear, I think, in those communities. You're looking at areas that got locked down very suddenly with only a couple of minutes warning last night. The Bogan Shire Council, Bourke Council area, the Brewarrina local government area, Coonamble, Gilgandra, Narromine, Walgett and Warren. And those communities only had a couple of minutes notice for that lockdown that went into place at 7 o'clock last night. And
what can you tell us about those spots, Robin?
I think the big fear for those communities, particularly if you're looking at areas like Walgett, also Brewarrina and Bourke, higher Aboriginal populations, so there's comorbidities there, and so the fear of and the risk of COVID is quite concerning. The other thing is these communities have small multi-purpose health services. They don't necessarily have hospitals. So the real fear is that if COVID has gotten into these communities, which we know that there is a case in Walgett, that the health services might not cope. That is definitely going to be the focus of health authorities at the moment. The focus in those communities today is definitely going to be get tested, get vaccinated.
Okay, Robin Heron there in Dubbo. Let's head to Newcastle now. Reporter Nick Hose joins us from there. So just take us through how this started in Newcastle.
Yeah, so what alerted authorities, Joe, was that people were seeing high viral loads of sewage in 3 wastewater treatment plants, and that sort of sent off the alarm with authorities. They asked the community to come forward for testing, and the community heeded the call. We saw thousands of people come forward and get a test, and that led to the beginning of our cases, really. On Thursday, we started to see cases pop up, and every single day we've seen more and more cases. Health health authorities have established a link between a group from Western Sydney that attended a party at Blacksmith's Beach near Belmont. So that's one established sort of link of transmission, Joe, but they're still investigating a number of unlinked cases in the Hunter region, and I think that's very concerning. Like I said, 3 nursing homes also in lockdown, and a number of cases we're expecting in today's figures to be associated with those nursing homes. We've also seen, I know this is a problem, across the country, but we have seen very long lines of people at testing sites, people waiting quite a number of days to get their results. We know that testing has been stepped up across the Hunter region to try and meet that demand from the community. And look, this is a great community, Joe. People are absolutely doing the right thing. They're really heeding the call here to come forward and get tested, to wear masks and so forth. But there is a bit of anger because we are still hearing stories of people from Greater Sydney who are coming up to the Hunter region when they're really not supposed to be. And I think that is really posing the greatest threat, I think, to our community from a health perspective, is they try and get on top of this current COVID situation, because the numbers, every single day we are seeing more and more cases, and we are seeing more unlinked cases as well, Joe.
And basically zero chance that the lockdown will end tonight.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not a betting person, but I say that's pretty unlikely. I couldn't imagine, with so many unlinked chains of transmission and the case numbers going up. I mean, I think we'll hear that at the 11 a.m. presser today, that we are going to be extended. And I have been speaking to business groups, small business owners, people that work in industries that are really affected by this lockdown, and they actually would quite like some certainty. I know that's always hard to do in these situations, but businesses are trying to figure out, well, do we buy more stock? Do we throw out stock? Do we put these people on? Do we not? And I think a little bit of certainty would actually help business, and in some ways they'd almost rather hear, yes, you'll definitely be in lockdown for another week or 2 weeks, because then they can plan. But officially the lockdown is meant to end at midnight tonight, but I'd say that we'll hear at 11 o'clock today, Joe, that's absolutely going to be extended.
OK, Nick Hose reporting there from Newcastle. Reporter Lara Himes joins us now from Sydney. Lara, g'day. So the case numbers in this Sydney outbreak now through 6,000. Over the last couple of months, a lot of the initially after there being a focus on the eastern suburbs, a lot of focus on the council areas of Fairfield and Canterbury Bankstown. But officials now saying that there are other suburbs that they're particularly concerned about.
Well, while there's been 110 cases in the regions, Joe, obviously the majority of the cases in Sydney have been particularly in the southwestern corridor. We have seen a bit of an improvement in council areas of Fairfield and also some in Canterbury Bankstown area, but we've seen a bit of an uptick of cases, particularly around the inner west. Now, currently there are 9 areas of local government concern. With that, there have been additional measures in place, and there could be 3 other councils added to that list. So that is for the Inner West, Burwood and Bayside. If those 3 are added to the existing 9, it means residents in those areas will be required to wear masks outside, and they will not be permitted to travel more than 5 kilometres from their homes. Now, the lockdown in Sydney was slated to lift by the end of August. One of the criteria in allowing that to happen was have the vaccination rates staying at or getting to 6 million. Now, we talked about it yesterday with the Premier Gladys Berejiklian foreshadowing that lockdown won't be completely lifted. Well, it's unlikely that will happen by the end of the month. However, we could see an easing of restrictions, but we don't know yet what that will look like.
Yeah, and interesting to hear her start talking about in that media conference yesterday the possibility that vaccinated people would be allowed to do things, or might be allowed to do things that unvaccinated people wouldn't. So it'd be really interesting to see how that issue develops. And what's happening with the discussion around compliance in New South Wales?
Well, we're being told that most of us are following the rules, but there are some people who continue to flout the laws. Now, we heard about yesterday how a man who travelled from Rose Bay to Byron Bay was COVID positive and had listed or mentioned that a number of businesses and properties around that Byron Bay Shire had been listed as exposure sites. He's now subsequently in hospital. He had told police or had communicated that he had been looking at property or had allegedly purchase property in the area. Now, under the public health orders, you are permitted to peruse property to look at for a primary resident. Now, it appears that during or pending an investigation, there may have been some rules breached there because it has resulted in the man being charged for breaching the public health order. We've heard from Health Minister Brad Hazzard, who say that authorities are sick of people flouting the rules, perhaps doing things that failed the pub test. Gladys Berejiklian, the Premier, today foreshadowed a strengthening of police powers and that the Police Commissioner Mick Fuller would be enlisted to oversee a COVID-safe unit.
Compliance is a major issue because in a pandemic, even when 99% of people are doing the right thing, that 1% can cause a setback for everybody else. So we're beefing up our police powers to be able to clamp down on those things and to, in a pandemic, you're never going to find perfection when it comes to the health orders. But what you can do is make sure you clamp down on those people doing the wrong things, which unfortunately cause setbacks for all of us.
And that has already happened this morning. We see that a man has been charged with allegedly making threats to harm police horses. They, of course, were the unit that were deployed to disperse the crowds at the Sydney anti-lockdown protest.
Okay, Lara Holmes reporting there from Sydney.